What is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Out There Project podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything outdoors, fitness, and anything that lies in between as well. The main focus of the podcast, of course, is just to get out there, try new things, follow what you're passionate about, and not be afraid to just go for it and get out there. So today, I'm joined with a guy that's killed a lot of big deer, caught a lot of big fish, and has even ran a marathon. So it's a good friend of mine, known him for a long time. Kelley is joining us on the podcast today. Welcome, Connor.
Thank you, Kale. Like Kale said, I've been involved in the outdoors since an early age, and also fitness has played a big role in my life, and grown up in Kale's hometown, so we've been friends for a long time.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know this. When I first started fishing, a couple of the first times I ever went fishing were with Connor, actually. We would fish in the pond behind his house, go out, ride four-wheelers, dirt bikes, all kinds of stuff. So even some snowmobiling. So it was always a good time. Let's just dive right into it. Let's kind of talk about your history with outdoors, how you got into it. Just take me through, like, when you started fishing, when you started hunting, and we'll just kind of go from there.
I guess we'll start with fishing, and I have both my grandpas to thank for getting me into the outdoors. One got me into fishing, one got me into hunting. And fishing, I started when I was 5 or 6, about the time we moved to where Mom and Dad live now. There's a pond just 100 yards away from the house, and that was what I loved to do. I would go out there and fish, and Mom would make me put on a little blue life jacket, and I wasn't allowed to get in the water, but I would go out there and fish almost every day. And that was probably my first love, was fishing. And over time, it's slowly progressed to now I do a lot of fishing up north in Canada, and a little bit of deep sea fishing. I'm not much of a deep sea fisherman, but really have gotten into muskie fishing here lately.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about muskie fishing. It's something that I'm not super versed on. I don't think I've hooked into one muskie in my life, and I was fishing for bass in the middle of a tournament, and it took me for a bit of a ride. But kind of, what's the game plan when you go out muskie fishing? Like, what are you looking for? I guess just, I don't know much about it, to be honest.
Patience.
Okay.
We kind of figure, like, we'll go up to Lake of the Woods up by Kenora, Canada, Ontario, is where we do a lot of the muskie fishing. And we usually figure we're up there for 3 to 5 days fishing usually. And we figure one photo-worthy muskie that makes the trip. So hopefully there's a couple other smaller muskies mixed in there, but there's a lot of days where you don't catch a muskie.
Yeah.
And a lot of days where you might catch a small muskie, but it always just keeps you going back, just knowing there's that off chance, any cast, that you could hook on to something truly big.
Isn't it, aren't they considered, the fish of 10,000 casts or something like that?
That is right, and I like to think my percentage is a little better than that, but there's some trips that you just hit it wrong with the weather, and it's tough fishing.
I got you. What would you say your favorite place you've gone to fish for muskie has been?
I got to go with Lake of the Woods up by Kenora. There's definitely areas that have better trophy potential, but up there, it's just so beautiful up there, and like the camp atmosphere is awesome, and up there, like, you're muskie fishing, but you can catch northern and walleye and bass, so it breaks the day up a little bit, that's like my true vacation, is going up there fishing. It's just relaxing, and it's always a lot of fun.
I gotcha. Yeah, I've always wanted to go up and do some fishing up there. My goal, or like my dream, is to catch a 6-pound smallmouth. And that's probably one of the best places to do it, is up north, northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, stuff like that. But I've been up there snowmobiling, and it's beautiful in the winter, so I can only imagine it when the sun's out and it's nice enough to actually be outside without being layered up and all that, and then there's open water and all that. But no, it's definitely one of my bucket list things. Other than walleye, obviously you've done some deep sea fishing. You fish around here a lot. What would you say your favorite fish that you've caught has been, other than or muskie? Sorry.
Muskie and I kind of the similar family, northern pike.
Okay.
The family trip for years was going up to Rainy Lake, International Falls, Minnesota, and a lot of what we caught up there was northern pike. So they're it's a fun fish for just getting into fishing
Mm-hmm.
because they're aggressive and you can catch a bunch of them, and they put up a pretty good fight. And I mean, a decent northern is 25-inch fish.
Yeah.
So it's a compared to around here, that's a good sized fish.
That's a pretty big fish.
And so that was probably my first love as far as fishing, was catching northern, because like I said, they were easy to catch and we caught a lot of them. But then they can get big too. I think the biggest northern we've caught up there is 46 inches. So
Dang,
you can
that's crazy.
You can hook on to some big northern as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. As far as, like, you said you've deep sea fished. Obviously, you said you wouldn't consider yourself that great of a deep sea fisherman. What's your favorite fish you've caught out there? Because I've heard there's just a very big difference from obviously freshwater fishing to saltwater. I have yet to do any saltwater fishing, so it's something that's definitely, hopefully, a trip coming up in the next couple of years, is getting out on the open water out there. But
So my advice to you would be the night before, making an early night. Don't stay out partying, and also take something for seasickness.
okay,
Because Mike, like what Mike was saying on here last week, he got seasick, and
real bad.
both
Yeah.
times I've been, I got seasick.
Really?
The first time we targeted sailfish, and it was a great day. We caught 3 sailfish.
Really?
And I think we had him for an 8-hour day, but after 6 hours, I was so sick. I was like, I'm ready to go back.
That's crazy.
And then the second time I went, I tried taking Dramamine before, but I was out too late the night before, and I think the combination of the two just really bit me. And we were catching tuna the second time, and same story there. We get out there, and I'm just super sick.
I feel like that'd just be such a bummer. Like, you wait all week or leading up to going there, and you're all excited about getting out there, and then you're just seasick the whole time. Would be tough.
It kind of comes in waves. Like, you'll feel really sick for a few minutes, you'll throw up, and then you'll feel okay for 20 minutes, and then it's just a never-ending cycle. And it doesn't really stop till you get back to dry land.
Really?
So it's a battle, and it definitely tests your mental toughness.
I can imagine.
But yeah, so my advice would be, don't party the night before, and take something before you go.
See, it blows my mind. I've talked to a lot of people that have deep sea fished, and a lot of them talk about getting seasick, right? But then the guides, they do it every day, and they just don't get fazed by it at all.
The guides we were with, they didn't, and I guess it's just something you get used to over time. And I was with a couple of buddies, and one of them got seasick. The other two were perfectly fine. So I think it just kind of varies person to person as well.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely something that's on my bucket list. I'd love to catch a sailfish. There's a couple that I have in mind, like tarpon would be a cool one to catch, and I'd like to get out. Like, I think it's in the Indian Ocean. They have the giant trevally, which are like one of the hardest fighting fish in the world. So it's definitely a couple bucket listers there, but if it ever comes to fruition, we'll see. But those ones are exhausting. You just run a popper, like these giant saltwater poppers on top of the water all day, and that's all you do. So I'm sure it's a pretty good workout as well. Obviously, like you said, fishing was like your first love outdoors-wise, but then you got into hunting. And like we were talking about before, you feel like hunting's maybe more of your strong suit, or more of something you're more knowledgeable on. Kind of take me through how you got into hunting and some of your experiences there.
Yes, hunting's more of my passion. Fishing's a vacation. Hunting's my passion, and it turns into a job. But I got involved in hunting at a young age. My grandpa took me when I was probably 6 years old.
Okay.
Took me deer hunting, and the funny thing is, like, that he took me deer hunting and ended up shooting like a year and a half old basket rack buck. But that was enough to get me hooked, and that was the only deer he had ever shot. My dad isn't a hunter, so I mean, but that was enough to get my feet wet hunting, and I just absolutely fell in love with it, and really just kind of learned along the way, and slowly over time just progressed, just kept upping the
Hmm.
bar to really where I am today.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like hunting, and in my experience with hunting, it seems like it's one of those things that you can never stop learning in. It's the same with fishing, I feel, but um, hunting can be super frustrating at times. I went through my first 2 years. I had great years. Shot a doe my first year. Uh, Shot a buck on opening day my second year. So I kind of was lucky my first 2 years, and I went on a 3-year drought. I didn't shoot a single deer for 3 years. And it wasn't necessarily because I didn't see them, but I kind of had a mindset going into it, like, I want, obviously I want the meat, but I would love to be able to shoot 130, 140, 150 inch deer, and I don't want to be the guy that's out there shooting, 2.5-year-olds and not letting, like, I hunt on 20 acres. I want to be able to grow the deer population there and be able to, like, grow some big bucks. And I think a lot of people sometimes they just settle too much and they're not as happy with the deer they shoot. But it was something that I wanted to try to avoid and make sure that I'm getting the right ones. And then later in the season, if I needed to settle to be able to fill a freezer, I could do that. But it definitely, like I said, it definitely tested my patience, and it was pretty frustrating at times. But finally, this year, was able to come across one. What would you say would be like the most frustrating time you had while you were deer hunting?
It was probably starting out. Like I said, my dad didn't hunt, and my grandpa got me into hunting, but that was the first deer he had ever he had ever shot. So I started bow hunting and started gun hunting, but I was learning from the ground up, like each step along the way. And I mean, there were a lot of years there where it's just your typical beginner
Mm-hmm.
mistakes, not hunting smart, not taking smart shots. I mean, just growing pains basically. Um, I would say that's been the most challenging part, but it's also been the most rewarding
Mm-hmm.
because when you start from basically nothing and um, get to where you're somewhat of a successful hunter, it's just that much more rewarding.
100%. That's kind of how I can relate to that a lot. I didn't start hunting until I was 20, 19 or 20 years old. I guess it would have been, I guess I would have been 18 or, yeah, 18, 18 or 19. I can't remember. But, and nobody in my family hunts, at least not actively anymore. And I kind of just was thrown into it. I had a couple buddies that hunted that gave me some tips and pointers, and went and set up a couple trail cameras and went and sat, and I was lucky enough to be able to call a doe in my first year, which was kind of something I had no clue what I was doing. I had a call, and I was like, she's walking away. I might as well do a couple bleats, and she turned around and came right in front and gave me a shot. But definitely something that I wouldn't consider myself anywhere near a master at, or anywhere. I'm still pretty amateur at it, but I feel like every year I learn a lot more, and it's been really rewarding for me, especially going through a 3-year drought deer wise. The rewarding, like this year, I was able to kill a buck, and it was honestly one of the biggest reliefs, but great feelings as well. Um, and you've had a phenomenal the last 2 years. You've killed some pretty giant bucks out at where you're at now. So kind of take me through a couple of those.
Last couple of years, I've been fortunate and wrapped my tag around a few good deer. It's one of those that you just gotta be patient. Not really settle for something under your standards, and just be patient and play kind of the long game. Don't pressure a property too early, and just wait till the time is right and the deer are there, and then you go in and hunt. And what I've really gotten into lately is more the management aspect of deer hunting, and that that's almost a different ball game than deer hunting itself, but it makes it that much more rewarding. Like where you have all these plans in your head and all these habitat improvements and food plots and all the strategizing that you do. I mean, it starts
right now.
Yeah, it starts this time of year. So you have months of just planning and preparation, and then for all those pieces to come together and to be able to wrap your tag around a buck that meets your goals, that is what I have found to be one of the most rewarding parts of
100%.
deer hunting.
Yeah, I agree. And before we get into that, I always forget this at the beginning of my podcast, but every podcast, obviously, as you guys know that I've watched it before, I always ask my guests to bring something for the podcast room or for me, and then I always have something for my guests. I'll go first. So I keep making the mistake. I forget to ask my guests their shirt size beforehand. So I have this shirt, but I can either give you this one or we can come up with whatever color you want and the right size. This is an XL, I believe. But it is my Outlaw Lifestyle shirt here.
Oh, those are sweet.
And, I have a bunch of different colors and stuff that we could do.
What's the fit on those?
They're pretty, they fit like this one.
Fit so
snug. They fit pretty snug.
That'll be perfect.
Perfect. So that's for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I always like to obviously be able to give a shirt, and, most people here, obviously if you're on the podcast, you fit what it means to live the outlaw lifestyle, be able to go out and do what you're passionate about and kind of live that life. So definitely something I wanted to get for you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I didn't mention, but I farm, and then I also sell seed on the side, seed for New Tech Seed. So as with any seed company, apparel is always
apparel's the big thing, yeah.
Yep, it's the big thing. So here's a New Tech hoodie and a couple New Tech hats.
Dang.
And then the best part is some deer sticks from the Salami Factory up in Princeton.
Okay, I've never heard of the Salami Factory.
Once you have one of those, you won't go back.
Okay, I'll try these out. I'll let you know. I'll give you a review on them when I do them.
Oh, they put a lot of other deer sticks to shame.
Okay, I do love a good deer stick. So that's my favorite part about killing a deer, is being able to get the meat from it, and the deer sticks and summer sausage is definitely the best part. And then these hats are sick, and the sweatshirt looks super nice as well. So I appreciate it.
Not much like sweatshirt weather today.
No, it's super nice. I've been waiting for this weather for months. Once you get to the end of deer hunt season, it's a bit of a boring couple months until you can get out on the water and start fishing, unless you get into some coyote hunting or stuff like that. But we didn't have the greatest conditions for coyote hunting this year.
No.
We usually like when we get about 12 inches of snow, we can go and sit on a drift and just call them out. But unfortunately, we didn't get that this year. And most people would say that's probably good that we didn't get the snow. But for me, I was looking forward to at least one big one so I could get out and do a little coyote management. But
it's not great for the coyotes, but I mean, it's better for the deer. It's better for the pheasants.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of pick your poison.
Oh, yeah. So, and, fishing in March, you can't beat that. So that's something I'm excited for, is getting the fishing season underway. So, but back to the management side. Obviously, you talked a little bit, mentioned food plots and stuff like that. Kind of run me through how you kind of pick out perfect spots for food plots. It's something that a lot of people just don't have much knowledge on. And me personally, I've never done a food plot. I have a little bit of knowledge on kind of where you look for to do them, but I'm sure if you've done a couple, you have a bit more knowledge on that and can give a little bit of insight on that. So,
the biggest thing there is your access. You can't have a food plot in the middle of the property and then be bumping out deer the entire way to and from the food plot. That's probably the biggest thing. And then second to that is a lot of times you're limited on where you can put a food plot. I mean, unless you're going to unless you're going to bring a dozer in, you can't put a food plot in the middle of the timber. So a lot of times you're limited to field edges or little grassy areas. and I mean, you just kind of have to make do with what you got. What a lot of people um, need to look into is um, renting or buying some of the grain off the farm, buying some of the standing crop off the farmer, because you'd be surprised. Farmers typically would be willing to work with you, and if you approach the farmer like, "Hey, I'd like to buy half acre or an acre of your standing crop," and just pick it out to where it's in a strategic location for you, but not a pain for him.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times they'd work with you. Or, I mean, worst case scenario, go to the farmer and be like, "Hey, I would like to broadcast brassicas or ryegrass
Mm-hmm.
into the standing crop. Would that be okay?" Uh, they'll work with you most of the time. So those two things are the biggest for food plots: your access, and then also just where you can actually do it.
That's right. So I guess I've tried to broadcast a little bit, and I know a lot of people have said it's kind of hit or miss. Have you noticed that at all when you broadcast out like different seed in rows and stuff? Have you ever noticed?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that has to do with the timing. Ideally, like if you're doing that through like a standing crop like corn or beans, it needs to be towards the end of like when they're dropping leaves or the corn's drying down, and like right before the field gets combine. Um, so you're looking at more probably middle of September, October, and that's where your rye really works well. If you can push it earlier than that, your brassicas work extremely well. But a lot of times around here anyway, uh, crops aren't combined till end of September or October.
Yeah. And then also, I guess another good question about food plots is what do you typically plant when it comes to food plots, or what have you seen work the best for you, stuff like that?
So my answer is going to be a little different than your typical food plotter because I've got farm equipment. Like I mentioned, I'm a farmer, so I've got the equipment to plant corn and beans. So those are my two go-tos. But I also plant a lot of brassicas, a lot of rye, a little bit of clover, not a lot. I usually like to focus on those fall food plots that are going to get deer within bow range during the hunting season.
Mm-hmm.
Where clover, it's a good food plot, but it's better nutritional value in the spring than really any time else.
Yeah.
Opinion.
So are you more of a bow hunter or a gun hunter, or kind of what's your preference there? I know everybody has their own ideas on it.
But I gun hunt, but bow that's my passion.
I'm right there with you on that.
I love the challenge of it, and yeah, it's tough to beat for me. I don't think I've shot a deer with a gun since 2017.
See, I've only gun hunted once, and it's just like I get the draw to it. It's easier if you don't have a lot of time. You have like certain weekends where you can just take off, do it. You're gonna get a shot off from a further distance, stuff like that. But for me, I love the challenge, especially with a compound bow. Right, I started off with a crossbow. I kind of did it ass backwards, where most people would start off with a compound, switch to a crossbow. I started with a crossbow. Decided I liked the crossbow. I wanted to try the compound bow, so I sold my crossbow, bought a compound bow, and that's part of why I think I went on the 3-year drought. Was I switched around that time, and it's the adjustment period of like there's a lot more that goes into it. You have to be able to get it back, get it drawn back, and there's a lot from the time you see the deer to be able to draw back on it. There's a lot that goes on there where with a crossbow you can just pick it up and dial in, but no, I think that for me, compound bow is the one that's definitely been my favorite.
Oh, that's how it's been for me, and like you said, I mean the learning curve on a compound bow, and it's extremely challenging.
Yeah.
And not only, I mean, shooting the compound bow, but also having to have your setups to where you have a deer within 30, maybe 40 yards tops. I mean, having to get the deer in that close, and then also be able to draw your bow back and make the shot. There's a lot. There's a lot.
There's a lot of, and it at least for me, every time that a deer comes in range, it always seems like it may only be 5 minutes, but it feels like forever. It feels like they're there for 30 minutes, and there's so much going on. You can have like a stand down with them, and you're waiting for them to look away so you can do something, and then they perk back up. It seems like there's just so much that happens there in that quick time frame, and it feels like forever. And then once it happens, it just happens so fast, and they're gone, and you have no clue if you got a good shot or not.
Yeah, I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah. What would you say as far as like stand placement? I feel like this is something that hunters struggle with a lot, at least that I've seen, is knowing like where to set up, kind of how to place your stands, how to obviously trim your shooting lane, stuff like that. What would be your biggest advice on kind of stand placement or placement for like blinds and stuff like that?
Like I mentioned earlier, for food plots, like it all goes back to access.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to get in there without spooking deer, and once you're in there, you got to be in a spot to where your wind isn't blowing to where the deer are going to be coming from, and that can be challenging. So access is really what it all comes down to.
Yeah.
And I mean, you need to be in a spot to where like you're in the game too. I mean, you can set up in a tree anywhere, but if you're not where the deer are, it really doesn't matter.
That's very true. That's what I think is like the beauty of, obviously technology continues to play a big factor in the outdoors as we continue to progress technology-wise. Obviously in fishing now we have live scope and we have these crazy downward imaging graphs, but even with hunting, now we have cell cams and we can be able to track the deer in real time. And I think it puts the hunters in a bit of a spot, I wouldn't say with an advantage, but be able to kind of stay on top of it a little bit more without pressuring your property. But it also kind of, I feel like it adds more factors to where it could almost be overwhelming trying to keep up with, like staying on top of it, and a deer's coming in, and now you're trying to get back out there without spooking it out. I feel like there's just so much going on now that it's like how to gauge like how much to rely on your cameras and stuff like that, but also still be able to have just like the regular hunter instinct of like, this is where I think I need to sit tonight. I just have a feeling about it. How much do you trust more in like your gut compared to what your cameras are telling you, stuff like that?
The cell cams have changed the game, and I don't know if it's better for worse. It's starting, for me, it's starting to get to where it kind of is flirting with a line on if it's ethical or not, because the fair chase aspect of it, I mean, it's getting there. The cell cams aren't perfect yet, but you give them 5 years, companies are going to have them to where they're completely affordable and they're reliable. Right now, cell cams, I mean, honestly, their reliability sucks. They miss a lot of pictures.
Yeah, 100%.
And their battery life is terrible. But like I said, you give that 5 years, it's going to be a different animal, and they're going to be way more affordable, and there's going to be nothing that keeps a guy from putting 30 cell cams on his 100 acres.
Exactly.
And at that point, you start to kind of, in my opinion, you start to flirt with the line on is that ethical or not, and you're seeing states like Arizona, and I think maybe Kansas did that, where they're outlawing cell cams on public ground. So I can't really imagine them ever outlawing them on private ground, just because someone could say it's property surveillance, it's for security purposes. I mean, I don't see them ever doing that, but I mean, it's going to be interesting going forward. I mean, with all these technology advances, I mean, whether it be Raven crossbows shooting 100 yards or cell cams, I mean, you name it. It's just, they're all geared towards making hunting easier. And I guess I'm not completely convinced that is in the best interest of hunting.
See, I agree with you on that. I see obviously where the benefit can be And I see where they're coming from with it, and obviously they all have the end goal of making money off of it, which is obviously what's happening. But I'm right there with you, man. I see it a lot in both hunting and fishing, right?
Yeah,
you know, live
scoping,
scopes
fishing,
change the
same,
game of
same
fishing,
thing.
and I think in times it can be really good, but it can be taken advantage of, and um, especially as a tournament fisher, like I don't hate it, but like it does really give whoever can afford a live scope a bit of an advantage when you're out there and it comes down to catching one more big fish to fill your bag, and when the coal, say you're 15 incher and you want to catch a 20, and you can go right over the top of a brush pile and see that there's a 6 pounder sitting in there. And I'm not fully convinced that I love it or hate it. I don't really know exactly where I stand. Um, but it's the same with hunting. If you can stay right on top of every single deer movement in your timber and have your timber scattered, I think it does kind of take away from one, the fair chase, but also the reason why hunting and fishing is so exciting, right? Is there's so much unknown. I think that's the beauty of why I was drawn into it in the first place, right? Is you go out fishing, yeah, sure, you have an idea of where they might be, or you have some sonar where you can see, like, oh, there's a tree laying here, oh, there might be some bait fish floating there or whatever, but you never know, right? And now with the live scope, exactly where the fish are sitting, and with your cell cams, there's a chance that exactly when that deer is there every single time it is, and it does kind of, in my mind, flirt with that line of, like, it's almost taking, like, the game and, like, the surprise aspect out of it as well. Not just the fairness in respect to the animals, but also just what makes hunting and fishing so exciting too.
Yeah, and like you said with fishing, I mean that's what I love about fishing, and for me that's what makes it different than hunting is any cast. I mean, you could hook on to that fish of a
Exactly.
lifetime.
Exactly.
Where deer hunting, I mean, granted there's still like that surprise aspect, but with trail cameras, I mean, I'd say 90% or better of the deer that I see, I've gotten trail cam pictures of. So that surprise aspect of it just isn't there like it would have been like when I started out hunting.
Yeah.
Which I miss that, but I feel like it also helps you be a better hunter too, from the standpoint like you can make a decision on a deer whether you shoot them or pass them well before you ever see that deer in person. Because the last thing you want to do is make a decision in the heat of the moment whether to shoot or pass a deer. Because I've been there. A lot of times, like your adrenaline's flowing, you'll make the wrong decision.
Yeah.
It'll end up being a younger deer than what you thought, or a smaller deer than what you thought. And not that that's the end of the world, but at the same time, you set goals, and when you don't reach those goals, it can be disappointing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to trail cameras, but like I said, I mean, I think we're getting to the point where we'll probably start seeing a few negatives.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you. I think, you play that line, you want to find, like, the perfect medium of what's right, and what's the perfect amount of help, but then you're always going to find that line of, like, okay, maybe this is too much. And with deer hunting and fishing, there's still always going to be that element of surprise. You're always going to be running a situation where you just have a random buck and rut show up in your timber that you've never seen before, and it could be a trophy. And the same with fishing. You may have all the scopes in the world, and sometimes you may just not be able to find the fish and find out what they're biting on. So there's always going to be that element of challenge that is obviously what draws all of us into the sports anyways. But I think what kind of bothers me the most is it's taking the mind out of the game, which is the whole point of why I fish and why I hunt, is because it's not just fun and the adrenaline's awesome, and being out in nature is this, like, there's a serene amount of peace, like when you're sitting there and there's nothing else to worry about. But there's also it's a challenge, and there's a mind game, and it's frustrating, but it's rewarding, and you're always trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? What can I do that's going to catch me this fish, or where can I sit that I'm going to see deer tonight, or how am I going to play the wind and all this? And then now you have, whether it be trail cameras, live scope, ozonics, all this stuff that kind of takes out some of those factors where it's not as much of a mind game anymore. And that's kind of where I find the biggest the biggest challenge for me is like I'm starting to lose like some of the aspect of like trying to go through still figuring it all out without relying on technology to do it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a big reason why we hunt and why we fish is the challenge of it. And like you said, you introduce these new technologies to it. It really starts to take away it. Instead of relying on your gut feeling, you can look at your phone and be like, oh, my trail cam's blowing up today. I should probably get in the tree stand.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, it kind of takes the mental aspect out of it, and you're just relying more and more on technology.
Yeah, especially because like one of my favorite feelings is when I just have like this gut feeling, like I feel like this is what I need to throw today. Go out, start throwing it, and next thing you know, you're on a big fish. Or same with like I feel like it's gonna be a good day hunting. I'm gonna sit in the stand. That's what my gut's telling me. You go sit there, and next thing you know, you're surrounded by deer.
Yeah.
And I think that there's just like something about being able to just have that feeling and be able to follow that and it work out or it not. I mean, either way, I think that there's just beauty in that. And then once you start to lose that, like, I don't know, it's just tough. It's a tough one to kind of come to terms with. And I know that's the direction we're going and there's no really slowing it down. The biggest thing that people can do is decide if that's what they want to do or not and just continue to do it. But like for me, I fish tournaments. If I don't get on the wave of live scope now, next thing you know, I'm a step behind everybody else.
Exactly.
It gives them the advantage. So you kind of still have to play that game of like, how far do I like withhold from doing it where it doesn't put me in a huge disadvantage to every other hunter or fisherman out there too.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I think it'll be one that is talked about in upcoming years.
Yeah.
I mean, both from a live scope perspective and from a cell cam. I think both of those will be hot topics over the next couple of years, and I don't have an answer for it.
Yeah.
And right now I don't think there is an answer for it.
Yeah.
But I guess time will tell.
And speaking of hot topics, I actually do have a couple questions for you, and I just want to see where you lie. There's some, every sport, fishing, hunting, they all have different topics that people tend to disagree on. And one in fishing that I see a lot is, would you rather go out and catch a lot of fish but none of them be sizable, or go out and catch only one fish and it be a trophy?
So that's where the musky fisherman and me, that's where that comes out. I'd rather go out and
100%
trophy fish. One of the best fish I've ever caught. I was 8 years old. I didn't catch a single fish the entire day, and then last hour of the day caught a 30-inch walleye.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. For me, I'm more of a trophy fisherman, and I mean it's all catch and release. But that's really what I'm the big fan of.
Of course, I'm right there with you. I feel like there's a happy medium for me too. Like if I go out and I fish for say 8 hours and all I caught was a bunch of 12-inch fish, I'd be pissed. Like I wouldn't consider that a successful day. Yeah, we caught a bunch of fish, but none of them were anything I was going to get excited about. But if I went out and say I caught a handful of, like let's say largemouth bass fish, and I went out to Lake Bloomington and caught, 5 3 or 4 pounders, I'm gonna feel pretty good about it. But at the end of the day, I would rather go out and all I catch is like a 6 or 7 pounder. I mean, I'm gonna be more happy with that than anything else. So I'm right there with you, but I always feel like that's always a conversation that I'll get into with people, and some people are like, yeah, I'd rather just go out and just catch whatever bites, and I'm like, man, I'm completely opposite of you, because I'd rather get skunked for 6 hours straight, and my last cast be a giant, and I'd be happy. I'd leave happy.
Yeah, I'm with you. The best case is where you can go out and you can catch off-target species while you're trophy fishing, and that's middle of June is my favorite time to musky fish up north, because you're throwing smaller baits, they're shallow, so I mean you're musky fishing, but you're still catching northern, and you're catching walleye, and I mean even smallmouth.
Yeah.
So that's by far my favorite time to musky fish, because you're catching those off-species fish, and it really just helps break up the day. But on the same hand, you never know which cast you might hook onto a 50-inch muskie.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that because I actually never experienced the catching different species stuff. So I've been bass fishing since I was 8 years old, probably, and I've been tournament fishing for probably 8 years now. And every tournament we go to, people are like, we didn't catch a ton of bass. We caught a handful of good crappie, or like when we have the classic at the end of the year, it's a weekend tournament, and there's always a critter pot, and somebody will have caught a catfish, like a 30-pound catfish, or they'll run into some crazy species and stuff like that. And I'm like, 99% of the time I go bass fishing, all I catch is bass. And the one time that I almost caught something else was when I hooked into a muskie, and I was using bass gear, so obviously it got the best of me on that one. Fought it for like 5 minutes, and it took me under a log, and I couldn't get it out. So it snapped me off. But it's something that I have yet to really experience a ton of is catching a lot of off-species stuff when I'm obviously fishing for bass or anything like that. I don't know if it's a testament to me being good at bass fishing or if it's just I don't know. I don't know how to take it, but everybody else seems to run into crappie and catfish and all this stuff when they're bass fishing. I just never do. So
I just go with it's a test.
yeah, that's what I'm gonna stick with. That's how I've convinced myself that's what it is. So I'm gonna stick with that. Switching off gear of the outdoors, obviously, like I said at the beginning, is you are in the fitness world as well. Obviously, you've been working out your whole life, but you also did just run a marathon. And what was that? The late summer, early fall.
Early fall, yep, Chicago Marathon.
So let's dive into that a little bit. It's something that's on my bucket list at some point in my life. I don't know when I want to dedicate that much into the endurance training and kind of because like I've talked to you about it before. You said by the end you really had to shift off of anything strength focused, and it was pretty much all endurance focused training. So kind of take me through. Obviously, that's got to be some crazy type of training. Obviously, especially when you're getting really close to it. But then the race itself has got to be a very big like mental hurdle and probably really pushes you mentally. So let's kind of dive into that, and I just kind of want to hear a little bit about it.
So I got asked to run the marathon by my now girlfriend, and it was one of those where she asked me, and I couldn't really say no.
Fair enough.
And so that, otherwise, running a marathon wasn't really even on my bucket list, but I decided she asked me to do it, and I wasn't going to say no, so I was going to run it for her. And that was the first big step for me. I mean, just signing up and having a reason to run a marathon, because who wants to go run 26.2 miles?
It's a lot.
And I'm not much of a runner, never was much of a runner. Running 5 miles for me, I mean, that was a long ways.
Yeah, I just ran a 5K in October, and I thought my legs were going to give out by the time I crossed it.
But. I mean, it's a whole different type of training. But so I agreed to run it, and when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
Of course.
And so I started training for it, and those 5 mile runs turned into 7, and turned into 9, and turned into 12 and 15, and I think the furthest we ran in training was like 20, maybe 22. And for me, that was the hardest part of the marathon training. The marathon itself went pretty smooth.
Really?
I felt good for it, but the hardest part for training for me was the time commitment of the training, because you get towards the back half of training and you're running 15 to 20 miles once or twice a week. Yeah. And that's a time commitment.
100%.
I mean, unless you're out there running like Kale, running 6-minute miles. But for me, you had to cancel out a few hours of your day.
Yeah, 100%.
And so you kind of have to pick and choose like what you're going to give up. And for me, like going to the gym I was like, okay, I'm already running for 2 hours. Like, do I really need to go to the gym? Yeah. So that was kind of one of the first things that got cut on my list. And whether that's the right approach or wrong approach, I mean, it worked for me, but I'm not saying that's the right approach. Yeah. But the training part was definitely the hardest part of the marathon. The marathon itself went smooth. And when you get into running long distances, really the only thing you can hope for is just to have a good run. Because I'm sure anyone who's ran long distances, like, they've had a bad run, and when you're having a bad run, it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Like 8 miles can feel like 20, and so that was my biggest thing running the marathon. I was just crossing my fingers, hoping, man, I really just hope I have a good run. Like nothing starts hurting, because I dealt with a few aches and pains throughout marathon training. And one of my biggest tips would be listen to your body. Don't be afraid to take a day or two. Like if your calf is hurting or whatever, your foot's hurting, don't be afraid to take a couple days off. It's not going to be the end of the world, but you don't necessarily want to push through those pains because you don't know when they're going to escalate.
Yeah, you don't want it to get worse.
Yeah, you don't want it to get worse, especially when it's training. Like if you were on mile 20 of the marathon and your foot started hurting, yeah,
better keep going at that point.
Finish the marathon. But like when you're just training and it's a 18-mile run and your foot starts hurting mile 12, like, and you run a mile and it's still hurting, like, listen to your body and don't just overdo it, and don't be afraid to take a day or two off. That's what I did, and I mean the marathon went as good as I could have hoped.
That's awesome. So how long? Like, so obviously you did training beforehand. What was like the period of time you guys gave yourselves to train for the marathon?
I want to say actual training started, I can't remember if it was June 1st or July 1st, and then the marathon was mid-October.
Okay. Nothing like giving you guys like the hottest part of the year to train for the marathon.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think the train, how many months would that be?
4?
I think it was like 4.
3 or 4?
4 months or something along those lines.
That's crazy.
And I mean, I'm sure you can do it in less or spread it out and do it longer, but I don't think I'd want to do it any longer. I was missing, by the end of the 4 months, I was missing the gym.
I bet. Yeah, you probably don't realize you missed it until you go without it for that long. I guess the big question I have about the whole marathon is, I'd imagine the mental challenge is probably one of the harder parts of obviously running 26.2 miles, or that's what it is, right? 26.2?
26.2.
I'd imagine the mental side of it's got to be the hardest part of it, right? Or at least throughout training, I'd imagine. But
yeah,
I've never been through it, so I don't know.
I mean, getting the motivation to, because especially training during the summer, like you need to wake up and run it early in the morning. Getting the motivation to wake up at 5 o'clock and run 20 miles. I mean, that takes some mental toughness. But running the marathon itself, like I said, it went about as good as I could have hoped, and it's just kind of a neat atmosphere with all the other runners. And I mean, the crowd in Chicago was awesome. So it really didn't even feel like a marathon until, I don't know, I think mile 20, I started to hit a little bit of a wall. But then you kind of grind through a couple miles, and then at that point, you're mile 23, 24, the end's basically in sight. So you kind of catch that second wind. So that's how it went for me. I'm not saying that's how it goes for everybody, but it was. I don't know if I'll be signing up for. I'll probably do another half marathon or a couple halves. I don't know if I'll be jumping into another full marathon.
You don't want to take a step up and do an ultra marathon.
I'm out.
So, obviously, I know a lot of people talk about runner's high and stuff like that. Is that like a real? I've never experienced it because I've never ran more than. I mean, a 5K has been my max. So, I guess I've always heard of like runner's high. You get going and then you really just don't even want to stop.
I don't know if I've ever been to the point where I don't want to stop, but I have been to the point like where I'm feeling pretty good, and that's where I was at the marathon. My girlfriend, we got to like mile 20, 22, and she was beat. Like she was ready to be done, and I kind of hit that runner's high, that second wind, and I was feeling pretty good. I think the big difference was every chance I got, I was eating, because there's like little little stands along like the route and
with like water and stuff like that.
Water, bananas, gels, and every chance I got, I was drinking and eating. And I think at the end of the marathon, that really kind of saved me.
I can imagine getting a little bit of carbs here and there as you're running would be super beneficial. And then the other question I have, because I've always heard this is kind of like with like long distance runners like that. Did you listen to music or not?
I did, but then I think it was like mile. I don't know if they made it to 15 or not. It was over halfway. My headphones died.
See, you should have gotten the wired ones. You should have rocked with the.
I guess, but I mean they were fully charged. I can't remember if they were old or not at that time, but they died. I think between mile 15 and 18. So.
Yeah, because I've talked to a handful of people that come in the store and they were training for marathons, and they said once they got about to pass like 12 miles in training, they just ditched the headphones and would just run. And I was like, I can't imagine just running without any music or anything like that. I feel like I wouldn't know what to do. I would just be lost without it. So I feel like I'd have to have music. One, I feel like the tempo helps if you get the right playlist.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people talk about that being help, like to pace themselves. But for some reason, some people just said they just ditched the music altogether and ran the marathon without it. So I don't know. I've always heard mixed reviews on that. So.
Yeah, those people are weird. I don't think I could run without.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't think I could either. So that's why I was curious if it changes once you get 10 to 12 miles in and you're like, nah, I don't need the music anymore. I was just curious on that end. And then I guess the last really question I have, I'm a sucker for fishing and hunting stories. So I kind of want just some of your best story on each end of fishing and hunting, the most memorable moments or memorable stories you have from either one or both, obviously.
You know, catching that 30-inch walleye when I was 8, that's probably what got my fish. I mean, I loved fishing before that, but that's probably what got my fishing addiction started. Mm-hmm. And the best part of that was my dad and grandpa were in the boat with me when it happened. So that's tough to beat. I had a really good day muskie fishing up on Lake St. Clair. Caught 4 muskies in like a low 30s northern in less than 8 hours.
That's impressive.
The biggest muskie being just over 51. So I mean, it was
crazy.
It was an awesome day.
I'm sure you were well under the 10,000 cast mark for each of them.
I was. So, you know, it was just one of those that they use great big rubber baits up there, and you work it like a jerk bait. You jerk, reel in the slack, jerk, reel in the slack, and for whatever reason, my cadence just was what the fish were looking for that day.
Yeah.
And I just had the hot hand, so that day was super special to me.
I feel like sometimes, man, you just find a day where you're just on.
Yeah.
And even sometimes you'll be with other people and they can't get a bite to save their lives, and you're just on it. You have the timing down, or you have the perfect setup, and even if they start throwing what you're throwing, just something about it. I've had those days where it just seems like everything goes my way, or everything goes the way of whoever I'm with. So
most of the time it goes the way for whoever I'm with.
Yeah.
I've unfortunately gotten used to being outfished, but that was a good catch up day.
Yeah.
I made up for some lost time there, because that was quite a day.
And I think it's a testament, obviously, to just the patience aspect of it, right? Is like, I feel like so many people get caught up in wanting like that instant gratification. Okay, I fished for 8 hours a day and I didn't get anything. Like, what's the point? And there's been times where I've gone weeks and weeks without having a good fishing day. You know, that's why sometimes I'll just go out to a pond that I know I can hammer them at and just kind of boost my ego a little bit there when I'm sucking in the tournaments and stuff like that. But I feel like that's a big thing for me, is like just grind out the rough patches and you're bound to have a good day at some point. But it's a numbers game at that point.
Exactly. I mean, we've gone on trips up to Lake of the Woods, so I mean, you're talking about a 14, 15-hour drive one way, and gone up there for 3 or 4 days and not caught a muskie.
Yeah.
And that turns into a grind. But like you said, it's a numbers game. I mean, you put in the time, eventually you're gonna have a good day.
Yeah, it makes it all more rewarding when you finally get the good day.
It does.
It's like that weight off your shoulders, and you feel going back into it with fresh legs after that. And the confidence boost when you finally hook into something big is unbeatable. And the adrenaline, that's why we all do it anyways, is for the adrenaline rush when you get hooked into the 51-inch muskie, or for me it'd be a 6-pound bass. That's what we all do it for. But yeah, how about on like the hunting, and what would you say is like your most memorable hunting experience?
That first hunt with my grandpa, I'll never forget. My grandpa and I and my dad were all in the stand for that hunt. And that's the one that got me hooked onto hunting. So that's a special one. And then the first deer I ever shot, Dad was in the stand with me. Wasn't it? It was a year and a half old 8-pointer.
Yeah.
Wasn't a giant deer, but that'll always be a special deer to me. Probably one of the most special deer to me was I shot when I was a freshman in high school, right before basketball practice.
Really?
We had an early basketball practice, like on a Saturday morning, and it was one of those. I guess it was meant to be, because I set my alarm to go hunting, and my alarm went off, and I thought I shut it off, but I just hit snooze, so it went off again, and I was like, I guess I'll go. And I got in the stand, and I was in the stand for an hour, and he came walking by, and it's one, if not my biggest deer to date. And at that point, I was new enough to hunting. I didn't even really know what I shot. Like, I didn't know it was anything special. But then my grandpa and I went and got it, and actually had another buddy help with the retrieval of it. And he was like, I don't think you realize, but that's a big deer.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of really started to sink in. But retrieving the deer with my grandpa, and then just shooting it before basketball practice, just all kind of adds to the story. And after the hunt, the picture and the story is all you got.
Yeah.
So that's really what makes it special.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys, I'm sorry about that, because the camera cut out on me about 50 minutes in. So there's going to be a little bit of time, obviously, as you know, if you're here, where there was no video. But we got it back for the end. And like we were talking about just now, obviously, some of the best memories, and it's a common theme that I've seen talking to most people when I talk to them about their best stories or memories, fishing or hunting-wise, is typically always when it involves other people being with you. I know for me, all of my best memories fishing and hunting have been when I was with other people. Like hunting wise, I was hunting by myself, but the biggest thing I remember about like killing my first buck was when my buddies came out, helped me track it, and we found it. That was the moment where it was like, okay, it happened. It was a good shot. I got the buck down. And same with fishing. Every memorable fishing story I have is not when I'm out fishing by myself. Like, I've had some really good days by myself, but I don't remember those as well as the days, where I'm with my boys and we're out just having a good time, but also catching a lot of fish. Or, like probably one of the best days was I was out with Tate, and I caught a 6.5 pounder, and it was, right after Easter. There was snow on the ground, but we just decided, screw it, let's go fish. We want to fish, and it was 30 degrees out. And stumbled across a giant, and it was just one of the best memories I've had fishing in my entire life. So, and then all the times where you're not catching fish and you're on the boat and you're just talking about anything other than fishing, and it's just times that you don't forget. So, I think that as an outdoorsman, I think that you find a lot more love for like having your buddies with you, your family with you when you're out doing it. And I think that those are the times that at least I know I remember the most, and I feel like it's a common theme that those tend to be the most memorable moments when you're doing anything outdoors.
Definitely. It's all comes down to the people you're with and who you're making those memories with. And that's something that you just over time you appreciate more and more because like I said, after you catch the trophy fish or after you shoot the trophy buck, it's just a memory at that
Yeah.
point. And so the people there along the way that help make it happen, and then are also with you when it happens, or with you to celebrate after it happens.
Mm.
That's what you remember the most.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, like you have the people with you, and those are the times you're going to remember. I guess what the last thing I have, question wise, for you is, what advice would you give to any like young aspiring outdoorsman, somebody looking to get into it, somebody that hasn't done a whole lot of fishing, a whole lot of hunting, it's wanting to get in? What kind of advice would you give them?
Hunting, that's an easy one for me, especially around this area. Get permission to hunt on as many properties as you can, because I mean, with each property you have permission on, your odds of finding, because the biggest battle for me and for you is finding a deer that meets your goals,
Mm-hmm.
that you want to hunt. I could go out and shoot a doe any day I wanted to, but that's not where my goal is.
Yeah.
But the more properties you have permission to hunt on, just the more likely you are to find a deer that meets your goals. So that would be probably my number one advice, whether that's two properties or four properties or six properties. I mean, every property you add, I mean, you're just increasing your odds. So from a hunting standpoint, that would be it. Fishing, just get out there. I would Anybody who gets a chance to go fishing up north, I would say you got to do it. It's just a different animal up there than what it is around here. And the disclaimer is it might kind of ruin fishing around here for you.
Fair enough.
But I mean, it's just so much fun. It's beautiful country. I mean, it's relaxing. It's a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just tough to beat.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm definitely my goal is to go up there and fish soon, but I hope it doesn't ruin the bass fishing here for me. So, but we do. I mean, Lake Evergreen's, they got some big muskie there too. So
they do. It would take a better fisherman than me to probably catch them.
I think they have state record muskie in there.
Yeah, when they shocked it a few years back, I think they pulled up a state record muskie
and saugeye, right?
A state record saugeye.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some big fish out there, but the difference between out there and up north is you go out there, you might see it's a 300-acre lake, if that.
I'm not sure.
You might know, but this time of year, you'll probably see, a dozen other boats or more. And then people fishing the shoreline as well. You go up north, you might see, unless you're like up around like one of the big cities, you might see a couple boats a day.
Really? Yeah, it's got to be different. And most of the time I'm on the lakes, I'm there like during the busy times or during tournaments. So it's like me and 30 other boats. So
yeah, I've done some fishing up in Wisconsin, walleye fishing.
Okay.
And muskie fishing, and that's the trophy potential up there is high, but there's days where you can see 100 other boats.
That's crazy.
And like I said, the trophy potential high, but just the atmosphere is just so much different.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a big part of fishing. Is I like fishing, but I also like the atmosphere, and that 100%. Just doesn't quite do it for me.
I get that 100%. But I appreciate you coming on today. I'm glad we got to talk about all things hunting, fishing, and obviously running too. But that being said, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This has been another episode of the Get Out There Project podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and please share it too if you enjoy listening to it. I'd love for as many people that enjoy listening to it, and for me to reach as many people as possible so they can learn from it and maybe take a thing or two from it as well. But I'll catch you next time on the Get Out There Project podcast. Peace.